This journey for me has completely changed the way I look at health and
Mhm.
the way our bodies function and the way that we treat illness with a medication. It's turning that completely on its head and realizing that we have it
Yeah.
backwards. The only
Yeah.
way to truly make a difference is by continuing to ask why and back up and ask why the symptoms are happening in the first place. I feel like people are rejecting that form of reactionary medicine. If we look at our situations 10, 15 years ago, this was kind of all we were given. This was our
Yeah.
only option. This was all we
Yeah.
had. But now there's more information out there and people are starting to understand that they have a choice. And I think a lot of people are starting to reject that and saying, like,
Yeah.
no, I don't want something that is
Yeah.
just going to artificially manage these symptoms. I want
Yeah.
something that is going to address the root cause of this issue. And
Yeah.
people are starting to push for more.
Yeah.
And, in my situation, I'm so glad that I went and sought out a second opinion. And it was actually my mom that pushed me to go and consult with a naturopathic doctor. And she basically said, like, what do you have to lose? You spend a couple $100, and if it doesn't help, oh well,
Yeah.
but you can't keep going the way you're going. You need to look for answers. And that decision ultimately changed my life. So it's great to see that these conversations are happening more and that people are starting to consider other options and look at different perspectives when it comes to health.
I suppose your journey was slightly different because you had quite a traumatic time before you were diagnosed, didn't you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I joined the military when I was 19 years old, and I dove into this life of wanting to travel and see the world and push myself in a way that I hadn't before. So I was in training for several years all around the country and then started training to deploy overseas and did a tour in Afghanistan for 9 months. And I think that I'm a mentally strong person and I always have been. So I very much had this idea that as long as I was mentally tough, I could withstand anything. There's this funny balancing act when we talk about resilience. So, you talk about your training for bodybuilding and being in the gym and that form of stress, it does prime your body for being more resilient. But there's a fine line between building and destruction. And
Yeah,
I didn't realize that I was on the side of destruction. I was on the side
absolutely.
of pushing myself hard physically, mentally, emotionally, not fully understanding yet how to support my body with sleep and nutrition and just lifestyle choices in general. We would train hard all day and then go and drink beer in the evening and just acting as if I was bulletproof, as if nothing could touch me. But I also had an idea at the time that what I was doing was healthy. Like, I remember distinctly thinking when I received my diagnosis, well, this isn't right. Like, I don't deserve this. I've been doing everything right. I exercise,
Yeah,
like I eat vegetables occasionally. I don't understand. I don't deserve this.
yeah,
And I had no understanding of what chronic stress and trauma can do to a person's body. I had no understanding of how the nervous system works and how years of chronic stress and dysregulation in our nervous system adds up and affects all of our systems in our body. I had zero concept of any of this. Actually wasn't until a few years later, a few years post diagnosis, after trying the medications and, like I said, just not getting the relief and continuing to suffer. And I remember I got to the point where I was avoiding eating entirely because I would rather just feel hungry
yeah,
during my day than feel those excruciating cramps and pains that came with digesting my food. And that was my strategy for probably the better part of a year. And you can imagine what that ends up doing to your energy and
Yeah.
vitality and, mental acuity, all of the things.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
your immune function too. Yeah.
yeah, pretty much everything. If we're not actually supporting the body nutritionally and giving it what it needs, you can't just avoid food for 8 months.
Yeah.
It doesn't work
Yeah.
that way.
No.
Um, but that was my strategy. That was my coping strategy at the time. And I remember when I did seek out that second opinion, when I went to consult with the naturopathic doctor, one of the things that she asked me was to make a timeline of my significant life events for the past 5 to 10 years. I had graduated high school, joined the military, moved all over the country for training, went overseas to a war zone, came back to Canada, got married, had a child, moved across the country again, got a divorce, moved across the country again, started a business. This was all within a 10-year span of time. And she's the first person that really made that connection for me, that stress on your body and chronic stress, what it actually does to your system. And then up until that moment, I had not even an inkling of thought that all of these crazy, chaotic things that had happened in my life could be having an impact on my health.
No awareness whatsoever,
No.
because you're almost just in survival mode at this
Yeah.
point. And as much as we don't actually factor in the wins that we have along the way, we just almost disregard everything else. And like you said, it just amounts to this destructive, almost too resilient mindset where you're not giving yourself any self-compassion whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. Not listening to the cues that your body is trying to give you. The body will start in whispers and give you these little nudges of, yeah, maybe you should start looking after yourself better. But we don't listen because we're not taught to listen, and we don't
No.
believe that the things we do really have that big of an impact. So
Yeah.
the symptoms just get stronger and stronger until they're unignorable. And then we are handed a diagnosis and we go, oh,
Yeah.
what happened? I don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. Where does this come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, you're 100% hit the nail on the head.
I think that paradigm is starting to shift, thankfully, in recognizing that, the illness we're diagnosed with in our 60s really begins in our 30s. And that our health isn't as simple as a quick cause and effect. I remember even when I started on my healing journey and I started really looking at the food that I was eating, I still had that really short sighted mindset of, oh, I'm in pain or I have bleeding. What did I eat today?
Yeah.
As if it was just that cause and
Always
effect
correlated.
kind of.
Yeah. A lot of the time it's not the case.
No, a lot of the time it's like, what has been going on this week or this month? Have you been getting enough sleep? Have you been under a lot of stress? Have you been pushing
Yeah.
yourself too hard? Have you been under eating and maybe relying on too much caffeine or sugar or alcohol or, all of these things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
But I ultimately moved out of that place of poor me. Why did this happen to me? To the complete opposite, to a mindset of viewing my illness as a gift, because my illness woke me up. I was very much just existing in long-term survival mode for years and not even
Mm.
recognizing it.
Yeah.
And my illness woke me up to what I was doing and the effect that it was having, and has allowed me to go back to school and re-educate myself and learn about holistic health and nutrition. And I don't think I'll ever stop learning about these things, because the
Mm.
more I understand, the more I want to know and the deeper I want to understand. And I think that hopefully things start to shift in this direction so that we are learning these things from a young age.
And from a parent, I think teaching your children these types of practices that they can then start implementing as they grow up, then that in itself is going to prevent them from disease. And
Yes.
this type of awareness that can be generational is so important, because then when they have children, they're going to be a lot more relaxed, hopefully. They're not going to be suffering from anxiety because they'll know how to control their emotions. And even whilst you're growing a baby inside your body, if you're not going through these levels of anxiety or looking after yourself, actually, then you're giving that baby more tools to, again, prevent disease. And this is like generational.
Yeah.
So it's going to give our whole population a new level of life, and hopefully a better quality of life too, because people will be getting less sick. And that's what we want.
Yes. And I think that that's a huge part of it. Is it's our medical system is very much focused on how do we stop people from dying because we're so afraid of dying, right?
Mm.
But there's been very little emphasis on quality of life and health span, and how can we live healthy, strong, vital lives for longer so that we aren't just dependent on the medical system
Yeah.
and getting all of these diseases. I don't think it has to be that way with a lot of these
Mm.
illnesses. By learning and by educating the next generation. This is why I love working with moms so much, and why moms are mostly who make up my clientele, is because you educate a mom and the whole family benefits. Their whole family
Mm.
starts to shift their habits, and everybody notices this ripple effect of health in a family, which I think is just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very fulfilling.
I'm curious about what your turning point was when you started. Was there a moment for you when you shifted the way you looked at your illness? Was there someone that came into your life or something that you learned that caused you to change the way you were living and really start making some changes?
I think it was just the general consensus of suffering from horrendous side effects from the biologic. Um, Things like extreme hair loss, and I'd pass out a lot of the time because my blood pressure's low anyway, but the biologic would just make it go crazy low. And I just got to a point after 6 years of thinking I was still having flare ups, and almost comparing it and being like, having the perspective actually on what have I got to lose at this point. I have all the tools that I need in my toolbox to know what to do to actually give my body the space that it needs to heal and take myself on this path. But I think, and this falls under a lot of people as well, is having the confidence to actually execute, because we're almost kind of fear-mongered into being on medication and thinking, well, if I'm not on medication, then I'm going to die. It's just having that backing of yourself to say, no, this is not working for me. I need to do something different. Because how many
Yeah.
years possible to have pretty much like no positive outcomes, but have the potential and high risk of getting cancer, because that was one of the side effects, along with 20 other pages of side effects. Like, I didn't want to put myself through that anymore. You know, I was sitting in that hospital chair, getting that infusion pumped into me every 6 to 8 weeks and just resenting it. Genuinely, like, hating myself for accepting this medication. And I'd watch it come down the tube and just think, no, I don't want that in my body. I just don't want that in my body. And it took a while to come to terms with how I was feeling, but thank God that I made the decision to come off of it and help myself the way that I wish I had done, you know, 10 years ago. But I didn't have the knowledge that I have now. So again, I'm not going to blame anyone. I'm not going to have victim mentality.
That's so scary, that because you are very much conditioned to believe this is your only option. And if you knowingly decide to stop taking this medication, you're essentially like, you're making that decision for yourself. You are fully responsible for what happens. definitely feel that there is a fear-mongering element to our healthcare system. I never got to the point where I was put on biologics, and thank goodness, because I found a solution before that point. But I was on 3 different types of medications and told that I had to be on them forever. And like you, I made the choice to try something different and took myself off all medications. And it was scary because there is that, even though there's that deep innate feeling that I think my body can heal if I support it properly, there's still that little fear voice in the back of your mind that's saying, like, what if this is the wrong decision?
Because you're basically having to be accountable at that point. And I
Mhm.
think that a lot of people are, and I was scared of putting that responsibility into my own hands and not
Yes.
being able to almost rely on someone else to heal my body for me, I
Yeah.
suppose, in a way.
We are conditioned to outsource the responsibility of our health to someone
Yeah.
else. We don't want to hold fully the responsibility of our health.
Yeah.
We like to go consult with a doctor, and then whatever they say, they're on the hook. If they do something wrong, you can sue them.
Do you know what
But
I
when
mean? Yeah.
but when you have the responsibility and you're saying, "No, I think I know best
Yeah.
about my body, and I'm
Yeah.
going to make this decision," it's all on you.
Yeah. And I think it scares the living daylights out of people. And upon reflection, it was probably one of the main things that held me back. That doesn't make you a bad person or a coward or anything like that. It's literally just the way that you've been brought up and
Yeah.
conditioned. So undoing that, it takes work. But yeah, it is possible. And we're both living proof of that.
Yeah. And yeah, it's hard to even at the beginning, it's hard to even speak of it. Like I said, I had a fear of sharing my story too loudly because who am I to speak on this, right? I'm not a doctor. I don't have a medical degree. And so I felt like I wasn't qualified to speak
Mm,
on these issues. But in actuality, we are the most qualified, you
yeah.
know, given what we've gone through to speak about this and provide that.
Blueprint almost for
um,
other people. And not everyone is going to have the same healing journey because people have had more trauma in their life than others.
yeah,
People will have to work on certain areas of their life more than others. And it's very subjective, but the general consensus is the same. And the thing that starts that and kicks it off is believing in yourself.
absolutely. And believing that healing is possible, believing that there's much more to the picture than what we've been led to believe, where you just sit back and wait to get sick.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the biggest message that I want to share with our audience is that belief plays a huge role in your healing. Because if you subscribe to the way of thinking that you are sick and you view yourself as a sick person and you fully believe that narrative of you are chronically ill and that's how you will be for your whole life and there's no cure and take these medications, I think that that is a huge part of what kept me stuck for the few years that I was there. When I started, I don't view myself as a sick person anymore. I don't find that my illness really runs my life anymore. It's not even really that much of a thought in my mind most of the time. And I know that people who are listening who may be really in the throes of struggling with chronic illness symptoms might think that that's unheard of, that they could get to a point where they don't think about their illness anymore. But I think it's possible. And I think just knowing that it's possible and starting to shift your mindset toward a healing mindset and how can I support my body better versus viewing yourself as a chronically ill person and then that's just what you're stuck with for good is probably one of the first steps.